Yeah, and that's a powerful point. Now, on that subject though, it's critical that we have a Hebraic perspective on these topics, right? The Hebraic analysis is one that really emphasizes personal accountability, personal responsibility, right? It constantly evaluates the circumstances and conditions affecting the people and relates it directly to their relationship with the Most High. Meaning, you found a way to put yourself in this situation. Now, that sounds very harsh. It's difficult, right? Because we understand how many of these things seem to be outside of our grasp, outside of our control. Like, we're not in those meetings with these multinational corporate executives who have billions of dollars at their disposal to implement massive social engineering projects. So it's just like, well, we're just all the way down here on the bottom. What can we do about the situation? It's not our fault. And there's a sense of comfort that comes. You know, it feels good to an extent to be able to say, yeah, you know, it's tough for us and everything, but at the end of the day, it's not our fault, right? Matter of fact, here's a list of people whose fault it is, and none of them is us, you know? And then so it's comforting, but it's a comforting delusion, because the reality is that you are involved. It says, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Then he mentioned what the other people were doing. Your lack of knowledge is the reason why you're allowing for this destruction to remain in your midst, because you lack the knowledge of how to cast off the destruction. It's not inevitable. It's not inevitable. Lupe Fiasco once said in a song, he said, you complain about the liquor stores, what you drinking liquor for? Complain about the gloom, but when'd you pick a broom up? So it's like, okay, they put all the liquor stores in the community. Okay, but then you went and drank from the liquor stores. The liquor stores aren't just there broke, right? You're buying the product. Oh, well, it's because we're depressed. You don't have better self-regulatory strategies, emotional management techniques. Possibly because you lack a spiritual foundation. What are they teaching in these churches? Because you go through these communities, liquor store, gun store, liquor store, gun store, liquor store, gun store, church. You know what I mean? And so you're like, okay, there's something missing here, right? For example, to make it practical, McDonald's is a massive multinational corporation, right? Powerhouse. They say they serve billions and billions of people a day. Now, the first moral question we would have is, how many dead chickens is that? How many dead cows? You see what I mean? Because that's untold rivers of blood, assuming that they're still selling chickens and cows, you know? But beyond that, though, they've developed incredibly effective strategies for marketing, for engaging the subconscious mind of people, to pulling on the wires that control the way that they think about certain things. Like, they've advanced in these sciences. But there's examples of countries that have successfully resisted McDonald's. Here's the trick. They didn't, because everywhere McDonald's goes, there's increases in high blood pressure, hypertension, heart attacks, certain health disparities increase because this is very unnatural food substance, especially as it relates to your heart and your blood and things of that nature. So how do you beat McDonald's? You don't beat McDonald's by just throwing rocks through the window and yelling obscenities and spray painting the side of the building. I think the country was Bolivia. It began with a B. I'm pretty sure it was Bolivia. They set up like 14 McDonald's inside of Bolivia on a multi-year marketing plan to go ahead and have the inroads into the country. And several years later, they packed up their bags and left. Why? Was it because there was a powerful political movement of super wealthy politicians who were very astute and health conscious and put a barrier to McDonald's? Was it because there was a public outcry of some sort and there were protests in the streets? Was it because there was a secret band of people who formed a ski math club, started knocking out McDonald's store employees? No. It's simply because the culture of the people in that country rejected McDonald's. They just weren't interested in the idea of fast food. They still had value that they placed on the idea of going to the backyard, pulling up the potatoes, bringing them into the house. Big mama got granddaughter peeling the potatoes. Somebody else is cutting them. There's a big pot of water being boiled. They're adding seasonings to it. Somebody's grabbing the maize. Somebody's grabbing this. Somebody's grabbing that. They spend 12 hours in the kitchen. It's a whole vibe. You know what I mean? It's the whole vibe. You can smell the food going through the house. There's a call. All right, y'all, dinner's almost ready. Get ready. People are doing whatever they got to do. They come together. All these plates is laid out. They sit down. They pray. They eat the food. The fast wasn't appealing. They appreciated their cultural traditions as related to food. McDonald's tried to capitalize and figure out how to market that. So they was like trying to add like quinoa and like little local variations. They made like a little local version of Ronald McDonald. They were trying to do whatever they can to make themselves seem relevant to the people of that culture, but the community, the spirit of the community, the cultural immune system of that people identified McDonald's as something that was incompatible with it. And they didn't have to fight. They just had to be who they were. And McDonald's had to go somewhere else with all of that. You see what I mean? It's not like McDonald's was too expensive. See, that's the angle. It's just so cheap. It's everywhere it goes, you can't get nothing that cheap. They're like, it's not cheaper than what I grew in my backyard, though. You see? And so then when you flip the script and you say, well, what about the Black community? Well, in the Black community, you know, we have all these leading categories of hypertension and high blood pressure, all this type of stuff. Let's blame slavery. Let's blame this. Let's blame that. It's like, but you also have a backyard. You just refuse to grow anything in it. Well, we don't know how. You refuse to Google it. You know what I mean? It's not that it's inaccessible. There's a cultural and spiritual problem. It's not technical. It's not like they're just better than you. And in the same sense that applies in the food industry, like you actually can eat better. Something in you knows that Krispy Kreme isn't good for you. You see what I mean? It's not lack of knowledge. They right there, for example, right on the pack, they write that cigarettes are going to kill you. You smoke them anyway. That's your fault. You control that. You deciding to self-destruct. And the psychology, the thought process, which leads for you to decide to self-destruct is actually something that you can change. It's a discipline that you can develop. It's knowledge that you can seek. And when we shift our attention, it's good to know what's happening out there. It's good to know what the corporations and whatever everything's happening in history. But until we get to the mindset of, well, what can we actually control? We can control what we consume by way of our mouth, by way of our ears. You see what I mean? We have a degree of control. And if we control those things correctly, then we can actually see our situation change one heart at a time, one mind at a time, one family at a time, and build capacity and grow. And that's what you'll find all throughout the scriptures, right? An emphasis on that personal accountability. And people say, oh, well, that's blaming the victim. Well, it's really empowering the victim to recognize the role that they can play in improving or making their own situation worse. So letting the victim realize that you're actually in control. Because until you get into that mentality of you being in control, you'll always allow for somebody else to shape the narrative. So although, you know, White Mike in his video was saying some things about white people needing to be accountable, he started rubbing his skin like, what about when we care? Cool, if they, whatever progress, cool, you know what I mean? Keep it up. Meanwhile, in our world, we got to do what matters for us. You see what I mean? We got to do what matters for us, not wait on someone else to come and change the situation. And so that's the direction that our thoughts need to go, whether it's with regards to music, with regards to food, with, you know, all these other things. And that's what the kingdom is built on. That's literally why we left America in 1967, because we needed to create a space and a place where we can learn how to be ourselves, to put our destiny into our own hands, you know, and actually ultimately build our own institutions. Last week, we played a song that was developed within the context of our own ministry of divine performing arts, where we produce music, so-called music. In Hebrew, it's pronounced nigina, you know, like righteous sounds. We call them songs of deliverance. And we produce our own genre of music, which feeds our soul and our spirit and pours into us the character and the intellect that we desire for ourselves and for our children. You know, because over here, we're simply reaping the fruit that someone else planted for us. And so this mentality of this paradigm shift is essential. And it's a big part of the problem when you see people like Kanye West. You know, he said that the reason that he made the statements that he made, and it'd be good to have a whole conversation about it, he said because he's jealous of Jewish people. You know, he's jealous of Jewish people. He sees that their children go to school. He sees that they look after themselves. He sees that they, you know, have businesses and they hire among themselves. He sees the success that they're experiencing in different areas, and he wishes Black people had it. So he made statements out of jealousy, you know, for Jewish people and wishing that Black people had what Jewish people had. But it's like a lot of what they do just comes from the scriptures. You know what I mean? Doing for self is a biblical concept. Looking after your people is a biblical concept. Some of this stuff is just ancient wisdom. So it's really that you're upset that we're not doing what we're supposed to do, but you don't need to attack someone else, right? In order to articulate that, just promote what we should be doing. Yeah. Be more involved in that process. So it's just an elevation in thinking beyond the outdated ways of thinking, which the victim mentality that a lot of people have adopted, to where we can be critical and sharp about these industries and about these trends, but most importantly, always shifting it back to ourselves and our relationship with the Most High and the responsibility that that creates within us to do what we need to do for ourselves. You see, it's very practical.
And that's what I was going to say about just reading this book. Like, and I was talking to my father about this because I'm like, you know, just when I think that it's just going to be like, as I'm reading and it's just like, okay, like, you know, are we going to get to the point, the practicality of like what needs to be done? And it's just like every single time, like there is an extended list of everything that we as people can do to really kind of this you know, this world and like how they are controlling the narrative. And so I really appreciate this book by Ben-Ami because it's like every single time it just lands with the practicality of like what needs to be done in order for us to get on the right path. And so really
because if you never go there, it just essentially amounts to complicated complaining. You know, and that's what a lot of people like to do, to get together. And I don't even like that paradigm. You know, people just get together and they just want to have a did you know competition about who can find the most atrocious things that someone else did to Black people. You know, who can find the most horrifying thing happening in the world, who can find the most negative. And then they feel good, like, oh yeah, I really exposed white supremacy today. And it's like, but at the end, we haven't actually improved the situation at all. And so that's a big part of the reason why you don't get no respect around the world, you know? And so Ben-Ami's perspective, by the time he wrote that book in 1982, by the time he published it, it was already decades into the process of building a better world, you know? Not just analyzing the world and saying, this is really an unfortunate place. I would hate for my children to grow up here. It's like, no, we're leaving here. We're going to build what we need to build for ourselves and come what may, you know? We'll figure it out as we go along. Let the Holy Spirit guide us. But one thing's for sure, we can't stay still and just hope that the Chicago public school system or the Atlanta public school system, all these other infrastructures give us what we need. We're gonna have to create it for ourselves, even if that means we gotta create it from scratch. That's the kingdom building mentality. You see what I mean?